Okay, welcome to the IELTS Step-by-Step Mastering Writing course. For those of you who have been waiting for a very long time, well, you'll be happy to know that it's finally ready. Now, I'm absolutely convinced that what I've managed to put together for you here is one of the best online courses to improve your writing that you're able to find. In this course, my aim is to try and get you to a 7.5 or above, so a strong 7. So even if you're sitting at a 5.5 right now, if you're motivated, hardworking, and you go through the course step by step, you will be able to reach the goal that you require. Okay, in this section, I'm just going to talk about the different parts of the writing exam in case you don't know. So it's important to understand which IELTS exam you are doing. So that's the first step. If you don't know which IELTS exam you need to do, usually if you're trying to go into a university, then you'd be doing the academic IELTS. If you're trying to go to get into an English-speaking country, so for visa purposes or immigration purposes, then you would be doing the general training, but that's not a guarantee, so please make sure that you know which IELTS you're doing. If we are doing the academic IELTS, the part 1 is different for compared to the general training. So let's have a look at that. So part 1 is recommended 20 minutes, so there's no limit. You can spend longer than 20 minutes or shorter than 20 minutes if you want, but it's recommended that you spend 20 minutes out of the full 1 hour that you get for the whole exam on part 1, and that's where you have to write 150 words, a report on one of these things. Usually it's about graphs, charts and tables, so the changes represented either over a period of time or product sales, all sorts of different things, but they're usually represented by graphs, charts, or sometimes a table. So make sure you understand how graphs and charts work, because if you don't know how a graph works, if you didn't pay attention in geography class at school or maths class at school, then you're going to have trouble with part 1, because there's a good chance that you'll get a graph or a chart, a pie chart, for example, in this part of the exam. Less common are the other two differences between two maps. So you'll have to explain how a map has changed over a period of time, a map of a certain area or maybe a certain city. The last one I saw was a map of 2 islands of the same island, one in the 1990s and the other one in the year 2000, and how it had changed over those 10 years. And then sometimes you get the manufacturing process that you have to write a report on. So for example, how honey is not honey, sorry, a manufacturing process, so that's a natural process. So how, for example, chocolate is made, so the cocoa bean, how it's harvested, and then the cacao powder is created, and then you get the milk added to make milk chocolate, for example. And that I would recommend you spend no more than 20 minutes on, because then you have to go to part 2, and part 2 is a whole another ball game. 250 words, so much longer, and you need to write an essay. An essay usually has a minimum of 4 paragraphs. So the first paragraph, the introduction, then 2 paragraphs for your main body, positives or negatives. In this case, if we look at this here, we see this example here: generally believe that some people are born with certain talents, for instance, a sport or music, and others are not. However, it is sometimes claimed that any child can be taught to become a good sports player or musician. So the examples are given as musicians. So you might have one paragraph where people talking about how people believe that you are natural at this particular thing. You're a naturally good sports person. You're naturally good at music. And then the second paragraph where you would be discussing the idea that you can learn to become a good musician. You can learn to become a good sports person. But it's very, very important that you are clear about your opinion in that. And usually, interestingly enough, the opinion is mentioned right at the beginning, so the first introduction, then you do your main body, and then you repeat your opinion in the conclusion. But there's going to be a lot more detail about how we do that in this course. Anyway, and these essays usually, well, these are the 4 types of essays you're likely to get. So advantages and disadvantages, problem and solution, opinion and discussion. This one over here is the discussion one. Discuss, di means two in Greek, so two ideas, and you discuss both of them, but you make sure that you give your personal opinion, and I recommend giving that opinion in the introduction as well as in the conclusion. Okay, so that is the academic side of things, and we need to look at the general training and how that's different. So as I said, part 2, let's start with that one actually. Part 2 is exactly the same as part 1. The type of question will be very similar. It'll be an essay it'll be 250 words, and it'll be more academic in its scope. Perhaps not so much as the academic IELTS, but you will be expected to do something similar to these sort of things, like discuss a problem and a disadvantage. Perhaps not so much in terms of learning, so you'll see here learning, because IELTS is IELTS academic, is about university work. This one might be more about job-related things, advantages and disadvantages of working in a certain environment, for example. But still, the structure is very, very similar. Essays, advantages, disadvantages, problem and solution, opinion, and discussion essays. Okay, and those, you'll have 2 examples of each of them in this course. But let's go now to part 1 for the general training. And this is again 150 words, but it's not a report. This is a letter. It could be a letter of complaint, request, advice, letter to a friend. I mean, this list carries on. And if you want to see the whole list of the types of letters you would be expected to write, go to the course map at the bottom. In the light green, you'll see all the different types of letters that you should be able to write by the end of this course, and you'll be confident if you get that type of letter in the exam. Okay, so that is the breakdown, or the parts of the exam, of the writing exam, the breakdown of it, how they all fit together. What you'll need to do in order to improve your writing is improve your vocabulary, improve your grammar, but the most important thing is to improve the structure of your essays, or your maps, or your processes, or just discussing the graph. And if you're a general training student, improve your letter writing skills for the task 1. The best way to do that then is to give you some actual practice using past papers, using model answers, and referring back to those in order to really analyze what it is that the students did well in order to get a band 9. We will also you'll have access to exercises on the learningapps.org website, which automatically check the answers, so you don't have to wait, you don't have to look for the answers in another part of the course. They're automatically checking them for you. For those type of exercises that don't have completely black and white answers, there is self-assessment tasks where you are welcome to submit your answers on the comments of one of the posts on the IELTS step-by-step community Facebook page. And that's been set up so that you can interact with other students and get ideas from each other and give feedback to each other. There's going to be a lot more about that in the rest of this video later on. So maybe it's best to just go straight into having a look at the way that the course is structured. So we'll look at the way Udemy structures all of its courses, and then we'll look into the way this course is structured in the course map. Okay, so let me just get the presentation ready and we'll have a look at it now. Okay, in this part of the video we'll be looking at ways to navigate the course, to find your way around the course, as well as some resources that we can use that will supplement the course. Okay, so let's start off first with navigating the course. So the first thing we'll look at is the way that Udemy itself organizes the course. Okay, so Udemy uses a system, at least for a desktop, where you've got the menu on the right hand side, and then you've got the video or the lecture in the top left, and then underneath you'll have a chance to ask any questions down here in the Q&A section. This obviously is the format that I will see as the examiner, but you'll have a different format. But down in the Q&A, you'll be able to write any questions you have. So let's have a look at a typical section. The first part of the section will always have a video, which is the introduction to the introduction to the section, and then that will give you just a basic lowdown, or let's say an outline of what you will be covering in that section. Then the next thing is always a test yourself. This test yourself section will sorry, my internet's not very fast at the moment. There we go. So this is a test yourself section where you will be given a question. Here's the typical question that will come up in this type of task, and then you'll be expected to complete the question as best you can before you do anything else. The reason is that you will later on compare that to something down here. So if you look over there, you'll see at the bottom of this section you have a chance to compare your essays. It'll be a different type of question, but similar. And the idea is that you'll be able to show yourself, so for self-motivation reasons, you'll be able to see the progress that you have made in that section, and it should help spur you on. It should excite you to do a bit more of the course until you finally finish it. Okay. Then the next thing that we will be doing is a model answer. In each section, the model answer comes usually after the unit preparation, but sometimes around here, perhaps over here. Okay, and that will be a band 9 model answer, which you will analyze, and then you'll work out, okay, what have they done right? What have they done that will allow me to get the absolute maximum for that task? Okay. And then everything else after the model answer until here, it tends to be either grammar, vocabulary, lexis, another word to say it, or something called structure, which shows you how, let's say, the framework to help you to build a good paragraph, or build a good introduction, or build a good conclusion. And there will be something also called learner training, which I'll talk about later. So while we're on this, I think it would be a good idea to just show you what you will expect to see per lecture. Okay, so let's do an example from here. These ones, the ones that have a little arrow like this, are exercises that you'll be doing in an external website called Learning Apps. So while we're here, let's have a look at what it looks like. So let's click on this one. Can you rewrite these sentences? And it's loading up here, down here, and it'll come up like this. And so for this one here, you need to rewrite the sentences. There are 2 mistakes in each sentence. Rewrite the sentences. Punctuation marks are important. And so let's say, for example, we've made a mistake, but I still want to know what the answer is. So I put in an incorrect answer. I click yes. It's still red. If I change the answer slightly and try again, still red. But on the third time, it gives me an option to see a little, gives me an option to see a question mark there. And that question mark gives me the answer. If I click on it, or if I look at it, it will give me the correct answer. Okay, and so I'll just hover my mouse over it, and that's the correct answer there, as you saw it come up. Okay, now I'm not going to give you the correct answer because I want you to try and complete it yourself. Okay, so that's about it really for the structure of this Udemy, the way Udemy works. Let me show you now what the course map looks like. Okay, so this course map is a PDF document which is available in the resources section of this video, and you can see that it breaks it down into sections and then lecture numbers, and it will give you a chance to quickly navigate your way around the course. So say, for example, you don't want to do any practice of task 2 today, you want to start focusing on task 1. Then all you need to do is just look at the course map and see where task 1 starts, and you can see just down here task 1 starts in section 10 over here. I'm trying to do this without it flipping so quickly. Sorry, section 9 over here. graphs and charts with a trend. And over here you can see the different colors. So the introductions and talking about writing criteria are in gray. Then the unit preparation is in blue. Unit preparation is related to check your progress. So over here, these two are connected. That's why they're the same color, because you're going to be doing that. You're going to test yourself, then you're going to compare that essay that you did at the beginning of the section. The other thing you're going to be seeing is the mixture of grammar and lexis. That'll be a sort of cyan blue. Then anything with structure. Structure means giving you the patterns or the framework to build something, like building an overview for a graph. It'll be in this green color. Anything with vocabulary, and another word for lexis, will be yellow. Anything with grammar will be orange. Okay, there are a few others that you might need to know. I'll show you quickly. The learner training, which I've spoken about already, that's where you learn, you sort of teach yourself how to check your own errors. And then down at the bottom here, you'll see down here, this is purple. These ones are further practice for the tasks like processes and maps if you're doing task 1. And you'll notice a different coloring for those of you who are doing general training. It's all in green, okay, for all the different types of letters. Remember, if you're doing the general training, don't worry about any of these ones here, because that's for academic only. Okay, so that's the way the course map works. And as I said, this is available for download from this video just at the bottom in the resources section. Let me show you where the resources usually hide. So you'll find here, for example, the model answer for section 2 is in the resources section. Just click on that and it's down there. Or in the overview, you should be able to see, or maybe down here. Okay, so if it's a lecture with text, then the resources are always in this section here. If it's a video, on the other hand, the resources will be over here available for you to find. On a mobile phone, usually you'll only see this, and then when you click on it, it will show you this. Okay, but I do recommend that you, if you have access to a desktop or a laptop or even a tablet, it would be better to use this Udemy app on those rather than on a mobile phone. It's just a bit difficult to manage this, but when you're doing these sort of things, it should be fine. It's not going to be an issue. Okay, now let's go back to this one here. Okay, so we've talked about navigating the course, how Udemy works, and the course map, which are, as I said, available in the resources. Now let's talk about lexis building. Now lexis is another word for vocabulary, but it's not just vocabulary, it's also phrases. Okay, so phrases as well as vocabulary, and all of that is called lexis. Okay, and you'll be learning a combination of phrases and a bit of vocabulary. But let me first say that this is a course for writing. Okay, this is a writing course, so there is a lot of vocabulary that would be beneficial to you, specific for example, let's say managing, it's called discourse markers, managing the discourse, managing the navigation of your text. An example I could give is the word however. However, when I use it, I'm saying what I'm going to say next is contrasting with what I've just said. So the word however, discourse marker, helps me to show the reader that I'm going to change my, contrast what I've said previously. Now those sort of words, yes, you'll find them on this course. But building vocabulary related to, say, for example, the topic of climate change, which might be one of the tasks that come up in task number 2, I'm not covering in this course because this is for writing only. What you should be doing is looking at the Mastering Vocabulary course, which is also available on Udemy. Okay, and that is where you can really build up your vocabulary. It's got a very good rating at the moment. It's 4.7, and there's thousands of students who've done that, so it's a very, very popular course. And I strongly recommend that you look at that if you find that your vocabulary is not as good as it could be. So let's just have a look at it over here. Okay, and that's my Mastering Vocabulary course. Okay, at the moment it's on special. And if you want to have a look at what it would look like, just go to preview the course, and you'll see the different videos available that I've made freely available to see. And also you can have a look at the structure of the course. Sorry, down here, the course content. There are 20 more sections than this. So if you want to have an idea of the most common themes that come up in the IELTS Part 2, all you need to do is have a look at these sections here. So take, for example, relationships, family, early learning. That is definitely one of the themes that would come up in the Part 2 of your writing. Or another one might be the body and the mind, another one diet, health, exercise. So these are the themes that will come up in Part 2. And so that's why it would help you to have a look at this course at some stage. Okay, now, having said that, let's go to other ways. You don't have to use this. There are lots of other ways to build your vocabulary. So let's look at those. So the first one is my favorite dictionary. This is called the Longman Dictionary. And Longman Dictionary, I think, is even better than the most famous ones like Cambridge and Oxford, because they promise to use only the top 2,000 most common English words in their definitions. Okay, what does that mean? Well, let's go and have a look at Longman over here. If I type in the word, let's say the word important, what Longman does is promises that they will not use any difficult words in this part. Okay, sometimes the definitions are a little bit longer than other dictionaries, but that's because they're trying to use those maximum 2,000 most common words in English. Okay, and I find this one of the best dictionaries for teaching students in English, so I strongly recommend that you have a look at this one. The other nice thing about Longman is that they give you nice pronunciation, so have a look at this.
Happiness is more important than money.
And that's done in British English, but you can hear American English as well. Over here, if you click on the blue,
important,
you'll hear the American pronunciation for it. Okay. Another nice thing is it gives you a thesaurus or thesaurus for all the different ways you can say the same thing, like very important, essential. Okay. So please have a look at Longman when you have a chance, because it's completely free and all this pronunciation is great for your speaking coming up, another course coming up soon for me. Now, just normal dictionary is great, but we also have to have at least 2 other resources for this. So let's have a look at the other 2. Okay, and now another thing that is absolutely essential to get our head around is understanding things called collocations. Okay, and co comes from the word together, and locate comes from the word place. So they're talking about words that often appear together. So there are a number of collocations that are very commonly used in academic style of English. So let's take an example from one of them, and it would be to make a significant contribution to something. Now that is a very long collocation. Most collocations are only 2 words, so let's focus on these 2 initially. So a significant collocation, sorry, a significant, a contribution. That's a collocate. So what is a strong collocate of significant? Well, it's a contribution. What's a strong collocate of contribution, it's the word significant. And the great thing about English is it's because it's such a well-studied language, there are even dictionaries now that show the most common collocations in English. And if you type in the word contribution, the word significant should come up. It even will come up with the verb to make. So the adjective and the verb will then feature in a collocations dictionary. So I can show you what that looks like, and the most common, or the most commonly used dictionary is ausdic.com. So let's go and have a look at Ausdic. When we type in contribution, let's see what comes up. Okay, so we're on Ausdic now, and I'm going to type in contribution. And there it is. Let's make this a bit bigger. You can see it straight away there, a significant contribution. So that's the adjective that comes before the noun, and a positive contribution, but you can also say significant over here, significant. Okay, that's an N there. All right, and so once I start to know new words, it's also important to know their collocates. That means the words that often come together with it to form a single collocation. Okay, and we see the word there. Make is the verb, so make a significant contribution makes for an excellent collocation. And so what we'll be looking at here is in this course we'll be looking at some collocations, but most of the collocations that are useful for you will be finding in the Mastering Vocabulary course. So take advantage of ausdic.com because it will help you to build your language. But if you want more practice of collocations, you're not going to find many of them in this course. Mastering Vocabulary is the answer for you there. Now, you will find as you use Ausdic more and more that there are some words that perhaps don't appear in this dictionary. So there is another way of getting access to that, to the words that collocate with the word that you want to look up, and it's a bit more advanced. So let's go and have a look at that one. Okay, this one is called the Sketch Engine. It's based on typical words that come up in the English language. So if we type in contribution here, we can see that this time they've put the verbs in front. So verbs with contribution as an object, there's the word make, so make a contribution. And then if we look for modifiers, another word for an adjective, you'll find the word significant, there it is. Okay, so contribution comes up here in this dictionary as well. But let's take, for example, a word that most definitely would not appear in the Ausdic dictionary. Okay, a random one, a wardrobe, and you'll see that this comes up here. So you can buy a wardrobe, you can design one, you can build one, you can get one, you can have one. Okay, and a fitted wardrobe or a double wardrobe, and all of these come up. So this is a very powerful website for those of you who find the Ausdic to be a little bit too basic when it comes to more advanced words. All right, and so that's the collocations dictionaries. Now, the other thing that we need to know about in order to build our lexis is a thesaurus or thesaurus. Okay, and basically what this is, it's a list, or not a list, but a group of synonyms for the word that you're looking for. So say, for example, contribution is the word we're looking at. It's a lovely word, but if I end up using it 3 times in an essay, it starts to sound unnatural, and that's one of the problems. If you want to get a really high mark, you want to avoid overusing certain words. Just because it sounds good doesn't mean that it needs to be repeated 3, 4, 5 times. So what we need to do is find synonyms for the word contribution, and that's where this type of dictionary comes in. And my favorite for this is Collins, and I'll show you why. Okay, so let's type in the word contribution here. And now what we have is synonyms, or words that have similar meanings to the word contribution. Okay, so in this case, if it's money, it would be a donation, or a gift even. If it doesn't necessarily have to be money. A grant or an offering. Those are all very good. So a grant from a government or a university, and an offering. So those are the topmost useful synonyms for the word contribution. But the great thing about the Collins Dictionary is that it gives you in the sense of. So if it's a donation, these are the ones that down here, these are the ones that would work. If it's in the sense of a grant, as in financial money provided by a government or public fund to a person or organization for a specific purpose, then it becomes more like a donation or a subsidy or an award. Okay, so I quite like the idea that it's easily organized and broken up into its essential meaning. The other good thing about Collins is that it gives you a chance to listen.
Input.
Okay, and you also have a chance to see the examples of the words in use. So a gift of 50,000, or funds from a local church, offering, or my donation for a grant has been rejected. Sorry, application for a grant has been rejected. All of these are examples with the new synonyms that you may want to use, and it really is much more powerful than most other thesauruses in online, at least the free ones. Now the last one that I would like to look at is the BBC Learning English website. Some of you may feel that your level of English isn't quite good enough to keep up with the work that I'm expecting from you here. This is a B1 level course, so you're an intermediate when you start this course, but you will be expected to get at least to B2 quite quickly, okay, as we go. So if you are finding that jump is a bit too quick for you, then have a look at the BBC Learning English website, because it teaches general English. So it's not IELTS specific, it's general English stuff, but it will help you to improve your level of English overall, and that will help you to move up to a B2 by the time we're halfway through this course. The idea being that by the end of this course, you'll be at a C1 level for writing. I'm not talking about vocabulary, I'm not talking about listening, I'm not talking about reading, but for your writing, you should be at quite a high level, at least your understanding of how to do it. But that needs, as I said, to be supplemented by some good vocabulary. And when I get my grammar course up and running, I will send you a link to that, and that should be out in about 3 months' time. Okay, now let's have a look at the next thing I want to talk about, and that is grammar, in fact. So as I said, the Mastering Grammar for IELTS is coming out relatively soon. I'm trying to do Mastering Grammar and Mastering Speaking at the same time, so it does take quite a lot of effort, because I work full-time as well. And then again, this BBC Learning English has got a great resources for grammar. So now that we've spoken about grammar and vocabulary, let's go and have a look at the BBC Learning English website if you haven't seen it already. Okay, and this one here, you'll see that it has lessons specific to different types of grammar, different types of vocabulary, or you can just simply follow a course. So say, for example, you feel like you're quite strong now, but you want to follow a general English course, then have a look at this upper intermediate course, or even intermediate, one of these two. None of you should be having to worry about this, because it would be difficult to get anything higher than a 5 in the IELTS. So you need to get around here, and then eventually towards advanced. Okay, but let's focus first on the vocabulary. Let's have a look at some intermediate plus vocabulary. And you can see here there's different things. You can talk about artificial intelligence, the economy, superfoods, different things related to the types of tasks that you'll be expected to do in task 2 of the IELTS. So this is a very powerful website. Okay, and that's vocabulary. And the grammar, take for example the intermediate level. Say for example you just want to refresh your conditionals, the conditionals over here, you can do that, and that's the lower version. If you want to do the higher version, you go to this one here, towards advanced grammar reference, and you can look at this word discourse markers, which comes up quite regularly. And here they talk about them in spoken English, but they still apply in writing as well. Okay. Anyway, and yeah, this is the course related. So Unit 16 goes talks about grammar and vocabulary. Okay, so this is very powerful. It's been going since 1943, so take full advantage of it. Okay, so that's grammar and vocabulary. And then I'd like to talk about other external sources. Okay, so we've got IELTS Step by Step community has a Facebook page which is maintained by me and other students, and we work together. Some of these students are ex-students. They've finished the IELTS, but they just enjoy helping people, and which is great, isn't it? And so this is something that I will be encouraging you to use, especially for certain parts of the course. So let me just show you what I mean. Okay, so take for example this grammar and lexis practice about something called hedging, how to avoid generalization. The task 1, this type of tasks are the ones where you check your answers automatically, but there are going to be cases where you might have one of these. It's called self-reflection, and basically you complete your sentences with your own ideas. Now, you're not going to get any feedback from anybody if you do it just here. So my idea is that you would write your answers in the comments of this post here on the IELTS Step by Step community on Facebook. And when you write your answers on there, people can comment and give feedback. So not necessarily me, but other students. As you know, I've got a large number of students at the moment, and it's very difficult for me to look at everybody's work. And of course, I do come onto this Facebook page relatively regularly, but not, I've got lots of things to do. So let's just have a look at this one. People have replied already. Adnan obviously replied a lot here, and the idea is that people will be able to reply specifically to that and say, oh, that's good, what about this way, think about it this way, etc. Okay, and so this IELTS Step by Step community is being used quite regularly for people asking questions about the IELTS exam and sharing their ideas and sharing their points of view. Okay, all right, so that's that. External resources for writing are few and far between to us for the large extent. I'm going to be sharing with you ways that you can give yourself feedback later on in the course. But one of the best things that you can do for a productive skill like writing is to use its partner, its receptive skill partner, and its receptive skill is reading. The more you read, the more you'll learn about the structure and style of English, and obviously the more you practice writing, the better as well. But if you read as well, you are certainly going to improve your grade. So it's a simple, all you need is a simple internet connection to get access to these publications that have a lot of free content. So New Scientist is a classic example, the one that I promote regularly on all my courses, that will help you to improve your for your reading in the academic style that you need. Another one is the National Geographic. The way they write that is also the style that you'll be expected to write some of your essays in. And then there's one called Popular Mechanics, which is a little bit it's not so academic, but it's still useful for those of you who are at slightly lower level. You can read some articles from Popular Mechanics online. Let's take an example from the New Scientist so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so you can see that's the front page of New Scientists, and many of these are free for you to read. So this is obviously, I'm making this video during the COVID-19 crisis, so there's a lot of that on at the moment. But let's say, for example, tiger survival threatened by mass road building. Okay, and there you've got a text talking about tiger survival, and you can imagine that task 2 might be, some people believe that human habitation or human health and access to water and accommodation is more important than wildlife habits. To what extent do you agree with this point of view? And this is something, this sort of text would be able to inform or help you to get some useful language to help you back up your points of view. Now, the interesting thing about the IELTS is that you are allowed to, in your writing, you're allowed to make up statistics. That's right. You are allowed to completely make up statistics. So you may, if you've made a point, right, then you would like to say, you'd like to back it up with evidence, but you don't have access to an internet connection during the IELTS writing exam. You don't have access to anything to back you up, but you're allowed to make up statistics. So you're allowed to say something like 40% of tiger habitats. I mean, I know this for a fact here because I'm reading it, but I could make it up completely. 40% of, let's say, 40% of Indian households, 40% of Indian households prefer blah, 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 whatever I want to say there. Okay, and I've just made it up completely out of my mind because the IELTS is testing your ability to use English in an academic way. It's not testing your ability about general knowledge. So feel free to make up statistics, and that's something it just brought my attention to. Okay, now that's New Scientist, and remember, so the other two are National Geographic and Popular Mechanics. And then we've got some other sources to help us to improve our writing. IELTS Liz is absolutely amazing. She's got IELTS Liz YouTube as well as her own website. Then there's another one called IELTS with Simon, IELTS Buddy, and IELTS-exam.net. So have a look at those ones as well. If you haven't already seen them, type in this into Google and you'll be able to find all this information. Just remember that this one also has a YouTube channel. Okay, and I understand that some of you found me on YouTube, so between me and Liz, hopefully you'll be able to improve your grade even without joining this course. But I am convinced that this course will certainly help you to get the grade you're wanting, which is a 7.5. Okay, so thank you very much for listening carefully to this introduction video. If you have any questions, please use the comments down below and I'll be able to help you out. Also remember to join up on that Facebook page for a sense of community with other students who are also going through the same pain and suffering of preparing for the IELTS exam. Thank you very much, and I will see you at the start of your teaching in the first introduction video.